Howdy, folks, and welcome back to another edition of LandO's Lock-Ins. Did I just hit you with the howdy? Yeah, I absolutely did. This is the series in which we do our darndest, our best to make the most accurate CDL pick'em predictions possible. And what a week that we have coming up next. It is Hump Week, I guess. That's not a title that I think is gonna, maybe trend by any means, but it is week number 2 of our Major 2 qualifiers. You can say, okay, cool, it's another week. No, this is a big week, right? We very well could be having some roster changes. We very well could be having some crazy results. Last week was a little difficult. We went 6-4 in overall predictions. This week, though, I think we could either score big or we could just absolutely get destroyed. It's going to be one of the two. So I really do welcome you to join us along for the ride. If you have the ability to, it's always fun. Pull up pick'em.callofdutyleague.com and make your own predictions with myself. A lot of people like to do that. You can treat this as a video. You can treat this as a podcast. However you would like to do it. I greatly appreciate the support that we've had on these. Also, if you have not done so yet, and by the time this video comes out, I don't know, maybe it's not relevant anymore. But for those who have not already, make sure to check out LandO's Logic, another series that we do here on the channel, where we dive in deep to certain subjects, certain stories that I find very fascinating within the Call of Duty scene. And we broke down the 3 major scenarios that the sub-blenders most likely are going to make. We broke down scenarios in which Krim isn't there, Clay isn't there, what teams they could go to, what challenger players, what players around the league very well could be joining the sub-blenders team, and very well for this upcoming week. So if it hasn't happened yet, if you've gone on socials and you do not see the fact that the sub-blenders have made a change yet, which is possible, I recommend going and watching that video regardless. Okay, let's go ahead. I like to do long intros. We got to stop doing that. So let's just go ahead and get right in to match number 1 of week 2. We're starting things off with the Battle of Europe. It is the Paris Legion taking on the London Royal Ravens. The Paris Legion had arguably one of the bigger stories, without a doubt, in week number 1 of the Major 2 qualifiers. A lot of hype right around this Jimbo edition. A lot of people very excited about the fact that the Paris Legion are diving into challengers. I really wanted to see them be rewarded for their efforts, and it doesn't exactly happen, right? Legion suffer a 3-0 loss to Gorillas. Okay, not great. Then they come into the series versus the Minnesota Rocker. They go to a game 5 somehow. I have no idea how Paris Legion managed to make it to a game 5, despite what was a very bad performance out of Jimbo. He has one of the lower KDs that we've seen in CDL history, posts a 0.49. It's not, like I said, it's not the lowest that we've seen in CDL history, despite a lot of people saying that it was. But I'm almost sure his plus minus has got to be the lowest that I at least have ever seen. He goes -52, goes 50 and 102 in overall kills versus deaths. I've never seen anybody get close to 100. So the fact that he died 102 times despite only putting up 50 kills, it's slightly concerning. It is somewhat concerning. There's a lot of debates on connection, a lot of debates on a number of different things. None of that stuff matters, to me at least. I think that it was simply just a matter of Paris Legion, who I think from a communication standpoint do not sit very high. I think they're working on their, their culture, if you will. I think bringing in somebody like Gravity is excellent. I think that the players that they have, there is some real potential here for them to come away with series victories, especially if Jimbo can get back to if he can get to the level that we saw him do in challengers. There was a lot of people talking about how he has to slow his game down, and I could not agree more. From the talks that I have heard from a lot of people in challengers, from a lot of the players in challengers, it is Jimbo. If he can be this, or if he can, continue to be what he was in challengers, he will be the fastest player that we have in the CDL, which is terrifying considering we've got the Kleenexes of the worlds, the Vivids, the Ibizis, the list goes on and on. Those are some very fast-paced players. The fact that this guy could be faster than all of them is pretty wild to think about. But he absolutely did not have a great showing in his first week, specifically versus the Minnesota Rocker. Like I said, despite his team going up 2-0 in the series, which is wild to me. So there is a lot to look out for if you are the Paris Legion. The only problem for Paris is that when you're trying to recap, when you're trying to figure everything out, you have got your most difficult test yet in facing off against the London Royal Ravens, who basically had the exact opposite in week number 1. They don't go 0-2. They go 2-0 despite playing with a substitute. One of the most impressive things about the week 1 of the Major 2 qualifiers was the fact that London managed to go 2-0 despite Gizmo being taken out for personal reasons. Again, wish the best for Gizmo. I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be back. Paul X, in one of his interviews that he had, I think it was after the LA Thieves victory, so that this is going to be his last match for the London Royal Ravens. So it sounds as if Gizmo is going to be back for this week, which is great if you're a Ravens fan, but also at the same time, I think the Ravens fans also got a kick out of seeing Paul X just absolutely just fit in right and well with this team. London beat NYSL pretty handily. I think they lost to Kavutu control at around 5 after a crazy attacking round. For those that remember that series, it was pretty wild. And then they literally the following day go up against the LA Thieves, a team that I hold in very high regard. They beat them 3-0. What? And they beat them on double Kavutu. Like I said, it does not get more impressive than that if you are the London Royal Ravens taking on what is considered by a majority of the CDL coming into this game as a, without a doubt, top 5 team. You beat them on their 2, without question, best maps. It has been a meme. I literally made it my desktop wallpaper for a while. Do not do not play the LA Thieves on Kavutu. Don't play them on Kavutu Hardpoint. Don't play them on Kavutu Control. It wasn't their choice. LA Thieves won the coin flip, so there's nothing you can do about the Kavutu Control. But don't play them on the Hardpoint. Ravens said, screw that. We're playing you on Kavutu Hardpoint, even with the substitute. And they won him. It was wild. It was super impressive. Like I said, and also I forgot to mention this as well. The Ravens, who have been struggling mightily on Berlin Search Destroy, I think they were 1-6 coming into this game. They had yet to win, or I think their only losses in Search Destroy. This is wild because I think that London does not play Tuscan Search Destroy. It's their auto veto. So they play the other 2. They've yet to lose the other 2 Search Destroys. So London says, you know what? We're going to keep playing Berlin as often as humanly possible. That has plagued them in so many series. But Paul dropped like 11 or 12 kills for the dub. Nasty had an amazing series versus the Thieves as well. So not only does Paul come in and give London a nice victory, he gives them 2 victories, one of which is versus the LA Thieves, a top caliber team, considered to be the best hardpoint team, takes them down on their best hardpoint map, takes them down on their undefeated control map on Kavutu, and then happens to lead the Ravens to a great Search Destroy victory, almost leads them in kills, and on a map that London have struggled with very much. Like I said, the list goes on in terms of the achievements for the Royal Ravens. And as I said, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Gizmo is supposed to be back for this week. So we're going to roll with that. I'm going to act as if Gizmo is going to be here for the 2 games that the Ravens have. As you see, they've got Paris and then they've got FAZE the following day. So, you know, it's a big week for Ravens. You'd really like to get this W done versus the Paris Legion. And I think that happens. I really do. I don't think that this is going to be a very difficult test for London. You know, it could be a little bit of adjustment maybe for Gizmo. I'm not sure if he's been playing a ton of COD while dealing with some, you know, it sounds like some personal things. So obviously I hope that that he's ready for this matchup. I think they're going to be pretty well suited when it comes down to this game. But really the biggest question on how many victories that Paris can get is on Jimbo's performance. Vetoes will be a question as well. Can Paris take a Search Destroy? Especially if we get a Berlin S&D, for example, et cetera. But I'm going to have the Ravens walking away with this game. I was thinking about doing a 3-0, but I think I am going to give Paris a map. I will say, I think that Jimbo plays better. I mean, you have to play better. You will be facing off against a very scary SMG line that the Ravens are going to try to throw at you. But still, I think that the duo of Don and Tom, right? Tom Gravity and Donnie Temp, I think is fantastic. I think those 2 work very well together, and I think that Jimbo will improve as time goes on. And you never know, if John's on Kavutu, he just seems to perform. So I'll give Paris a map. I'm hesitant to do that, but I do think that Paris will be able to secure at least one. I have no idea what it'll be. It'll have to be a Search Destroy, maybe a Control, but I'll give it to him. All right. Moving on, OpTic Texas versus the Seattle Surge. One of the bigger stories that we have of this week is going to be on OpTic Texas for obvious reasons, right? They are the Major 1 champions, and they come into their match last week versus the LA Thieves, And it was a doozy. It was a very, very interesting series. It goes down to a game 5, round 11. One of my favorite series that we've seen in a while. Actually, I'll say this. One of my favorite game 5s that we've seen in a while. Probably not one of my favorite series that we've seen. And the reason being is because it was a very weird set. Like it was as if OpTic comes out, 100-point clubs, LA Thieves on Tuscan Hardpoint. Everyone's like, oh shoot, like both of these teams were undefeated on Tuscan. OpTic surely is going to 3-0, 3-1 these guys. Then LA Thieves come out on Desert Siege Search Destroy, 6-0 OpTic. It was like you had a picture-perfect Tuscan out of OpTic, literally a perfect S&D out of the Thieves. OpTic, they reply back with a perfect 3-0 on Tuscan Control. And then you're like, okay, well, what's going to happen now? Surely Thieves are going to answer back and just dominate on Berlin. That pretty much happens. It's a 250 to 205 game. OpTic came back and I think got like a good 30, 40 seconds later in the game, but it very well could have been a 250 to 130, 140, 150 type of game. So very much so a dominant performance in the first 4 maps. And then the last one comes down to a round 11 where OpTic make the call in the 3 versus 3. An excellent moment for them. And also one thing to keep in mind is that the 2 maps that OpTic did lose in this series, which are Berlin Hardpoint that they've struggled with, not one that they like to play. Pretty sure they're now 0-3 or 0-4 on it. And then that Desert Siege Search Destroy, which they're not the biggest fan of either. They wanted to test out their map pool. That's what Coach Cinder had talked about. He's like, hey, in this series, we decided to bring out a few things to make it interesting. So again, if LA Thieves walk away with the series, that really sucks if you're OpTic, but at the same time, you managed to get away with a dub. And on the maps that you like to play, you thrashed them outside of the Tuscan Search Destroy, which did go to around 11. But the one thing that was also very impressive about that series victory for OpTic as well is that they put up some of the more crazier stats that I've seen in a top caliber match in a while. They outslayed the LA Thieves in that opening Tuscan by 46 kills. 46. As I said, LAT were 4-0 on Tuscan Hardpoint, considered to be one of the, if not the best hardpoint team in the game coming into that match, and they get outslayed by 46. They get 100-point clubbed. We then go into the Tuscan Control. Has not been a good map for the LA Thieves, and is Tuscan Control. They like Gavutsu a lot more, but they get outslayed by 30. I think, what are the numbers? I have it right here. OpTic outslayed the LA Thieves by 71 kills. 71. I don't know if I've ever seen that. We saw some record-breaking numbers this past week. Jimbo goes -52. OpTic outslays the LA Thieves by 71 kills despite going to a game 5. I don't get it. I don't understand it. That is an impressive W if you're OpTic. Still going to a game 5 though is obviously the question, but those 2 Tuscans, absolute thrashing out of the OpTic boys. So they're feeling pretty good despite going to a game 5 round 11. Again, you're trying to beef up the map pool a little bit. And this is going to be the test for Seattle, who are also off of a nice victory, right? They answer back in a big way versus Atlanta FaZe after a 5-game losing spree. Seattle come back, and much like this franchise continues to do versus FaZe, they take them down. I could not believe it. Jay and I, for whatever reason, just continue to have these casts. I hope it honestly becomes a thing where it's just he and I always have the Seattle versus Atlanta games. It happened at Major 5 back in Cold War, where we saw the crazy classic clutch on Raid Search Destroy. I shouldn't say the crazy classic clutch, but just the clutch in general out of Seattle, where they knocked Atlanta out early in the tournament. Then we had the Kickoff Classic, right, where this new Seattle team takes down FaZe 3-1. Crazy round 11 Search Destroy, crazy comeback in the game 4 Tuscan Hardpoint, just a number, and also the Gavutsu Control in game number 3 also came down to a crazy little 1v2 there for Max. So I don't know, man. There is just something about this Seattle team that just has Atlanta FaZe's number. And Jay and I noticed it. We actually had a conversation after the game 2 Search Destroy. We were in a commercial break. It was 1-1 at that point. He and I were like, this Seattle team just looks like they're slaying a little differently. They look like they were so focused. It looked like they were prepared. Pred especially looked to be in a much better form than he's looked at as of late, who I really want to see just absolutely dominate. and really pick up from the Kickoff Classic performance, because Seattle, until this victory, have not looked like the same roster that was at the Kickoff Classic. Like I said, they're clutching Game 5 round 11s and barely getting through series, getting 3-0'd by teams like the Florida Mutineers and the Minnesota Rocker. It just does not look like the same Surge roster. And then we also had the great Game 4 Berlin, where Seattle just absolutely turned up, where Mac went like, I forget, it was like 29-14, just had an excellent performance. So I don't know. Like I said, the Seattle team, I think a lot of people coming into this matchup, right, if you were already looking ahead at week 2 when we were at the start off of week 1, looking ahead, you're like, okay, probably a 3-0 for probably a 3-0 for OpTic. I don't know now, right? I don't know now if you necessarily think that same thing. I will say the problem for Seattle instantly off the rip when it comes down to the vetoes, the instant thing that you have to think about is that Seattle, outside of the Berlin victory they have versus Atlanta FaZe, which again, who knows if that's going to be consistent, they love Tuscan Hardpoint. It is their only good hardpoint map. And the problem, right, if you're Seattle, is that you're facing off against a team who is now 5-0 on Tuscan, a team that just 100-point clubbed LA Thieves, outslated by 50. I don't know if you're the Seattle Surge and you're going to say, yeah, we'll play him on that. We'll play him on that. I don't know. I just don't know if you necessarily walk into that and you're like, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So it'll be an interesting series, an interesting moment for Surge, whether or not they'll back down, if you will, and really play against the best team in the game's strengths, or if they'll say, yeah, we'll just go ahead and square up. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it does not. If you're Seattle, do you want to take out your best hard point? Or, do you want to try and take them on that very map and mode? So it'll be an interesting set of vetoes for this one. I don't know. This is, to me, is going to come down to a few different things. I think this could also come down potentially to OpTic still testing some things out in the veto process, which is very possible. They could be bringing out some interesting search destroy ideas. Then that could give Seattle a chance in this series. So again, are we going to invest in what Seattle did versus Atlanta as a sign of things to come? I think it has woken this team up, at least in some caliber. But is it going to be enough to take on a roster like OpTic? Maybe Surge just have this momentum when they face off against top rosters. Is it going to happen again? A very difficult back-to-back schedule at having FaZe and then OpTic. But I am going to give OpTic the dub. The question is, does Seattle force a game 5? Do they win a search and destroy? Do they walk away with the control? I don't know. I hesitate to maybe give them a search destroy. The only thing that, like I said, that I would give Seattle a map for, just to be honest, in this series, is if OpTic looks to test things out. Maybe OpTic gets rid of the Tuscan Hardpoint, says, hey, you know what? We know this team's going to be good on Tuscan Hardpoint. Let's just get that out and let's just try something different. Let's maybe try to that Berlin again to see if that works for us, which was great for Surge. So because of that, I will give Seattle a map, but I'm hesitant because I think that this easily could be a 3-0 for OpTic, if we're just being honest. But no, actually, I'm going to go 3-0. Screw it. I'm going to go 3-0 for OpTic. I don't know. I for some reason, I just feel as if that Surge aren't going to be able to answer after that phased up. We'll see. Really, I really hope that we see Surge come out and just look a lot better. And now I'm questioning whether or not I should go 3-1 for this. I have no idea. Yeah, we'll do 3-1. I can't make a decision. I'm probably gonna look at this and be like, Landon, why did you do that? But we'll roll with it anyway. Moving on to Boston Bridge versus Minnesota Rocker. I just gotta get out of that series. Everybody who's doing their pickups is like, okay, Landon's gonna go 3-0. No, he's not. He's gonna go 3-1. Oh no, he's gonna go 3-0. Okay, no, he's at 3-1. Like I said, my apologies. I sometimes have a prediction listed on my screen and I just don't listen to it. We'll jump into the next one. Minnesota versus Boston. Minnesota are off of a 1-1 week. They have a 3-1 loss to the Toronto Ultra and a 3-2 victory over the Paris Legion. As we said, they somehow go to a game 5 versus the Paris Legion, despite Jimbo dying 102 times. Doesn't make any sense to me. How does Minnesota go down 2-0? I have no idea. Last week, Minnesota did decide, coming into Major 2, they decided to make the role change, right? Put attached to the main AR, priested to an SMG. I love that move. I feel like that is the best move that they can make. But if you were to look at the 2 series that they have, nothing really changes. I mean, to be totally honest, nothing really looks different if you are a Minnesota fan. You lose versus Toronto. You lose both the hard points. You also lose the control. in terms of making that role change. It's not for search destroy. Lord knows they're great at search destroy. It is for respawns. They drop all three versus Toronto, then versus Paris. They go down 0-2, losing a Tuscan hardpoint. Grant, and that was a crazy one, right? I mean, obviously we could talk about that. Minnesota very well could have won that hardpoint versus Paris if Standy doesn't get off of that P1 on Tuscan, which is also a very wild moment. So this easily, I shouldn't say easily, but it very well could have been a 3-1 victory for Minnesota versus Paris. So there is that to think about. And you know, they did go on to win the Tuscan 3-1, the Berlin hardpoint 250-143. And then they control the Bocage 6-3 as well. But again, you're thinking about the fact that there's a player who's literally dying twice every life. Like he's literally getting 1 kill every 2 lives guaranteed. So there's a few things to think about for Minnesota. And to me, this week for them, right, they've got Boston, and then they've got the LA Thieves. So 2 very big games for the Rocker in which those role changes will absolutely be tested. That is absolutely going to be the case. Like I said, from a results perspective, you could argue they look a little bit better, but it's not really like you're not going to take a series versus Paris into full-on consideration to be like, yeah, look, we look way better at respawns. We actually won a control. No, you're not looking at it like that. To me, if anything, it just kind of shows that maybe more than anything, Rocker's potential or ceiling and respawns may have been tapped into. We will see versus Boston and especially versus the Thieves where those respawns sit. Boston is a team, which we'll talk with them in just a moment, who can win hard points. They can win search destroys. It feels like it's one or the other. So as I said, it will be a good test for Rocker, especially in this game, to see where they sit in the hard points. But Rocker also 1-5 in their last 6 HPs. And also one thing that I did notice is that in Vanguard so far, in official matches, Minnesota have yet to win a Bocage or a Tuscan. What does that tell you? SMGs. They recognize now, especially SMG maps are not the way for them, right? They do not sit well when it comes to those maps. And if you're Boston, a team that likes to play Bocage, they also like to play a Berlin or a Gavutsu every once in a while. Like Boston is a team that likes to play both. And obviously having Capsule off of a wonderful, wonderful hardpoint versus Seattle, where he claimed the King of the Cage title, dropping 54. I don't know. Maybe if you're Boston, you look great in the hard points, or maybe this could be a good opportunity, as I said, for Rocker to really be testing those. And honestly, if you're Boston as well, you're like, hey, these guys really aren't great at SMG maps. Yeah, let's go and give Cap the role. Let's go and give Cap the run of the mill to do whatever he'd like to do. So as I said, for Boston, you know, they only have 1 match last week, but it's a solid one, right? A 3-1 victory versus Seattle. As I said, Cap drops 54 on Bocage, which I think is an all-time CDL record. What you expect, right, for a map like Bocage? That's going to be the one that probably seals the deal. I would argue that Simp's like 51 or 52 in Azir Cave is slightly more impressive because Bocage is, you know, literally absolutely hectic. And I expect, honestly, that for that 54 kills to be broken. I think at some point we very well could see someone drop 60. I have no idea, but it's very possible. I don't know. I just continue to get happier about what I'm seeing with the Breach. Like they're getting W's versus teams that they should get W's first. Or versus, I should say. And then if you look at, like, you know, their overall series counts, like, you know, the way that they exit the Major 1 tournament is off of a Game 5 loss versus Toronto, in which they win both of the hard points. I don't know. Like I said, Boston is looking like a more well-rounded team as time goes on. The problem with Boston is that whenever they're facing off against top caliber teams, they're not usually winning hard points, they're winning search destroys. When they're facing off against lower caliber teams, it feels like they're winning hard points but not winning search destroys. It feels like it's one and the other. And as I said, Breach are going to continue to look for that consistency in the hard points and in the S&Ds, and that is way more difficult than it sounds. Also, Control is not great, right? Control is not looking solid for Boston. What they allowed for like the 2v6 clutch in that Tuscan where it could have gone to a round 5 versus Seattle. So that continues to not be a great mode for them. As well, I prefer to see them on Tuscan, honestly, over a Gavutsu a majority of the time. But in this series, it's annoying because I want to give Boston the W because I really like the progress that this team is making. On the other side for Rocker, this is a huge game for them. This is a tester of a series where, again, those role changes get brought up. The whole idea of them performing on a top level, and Response is going to get brought up as well. I don't know. I'm going to like the Breach more in Hardpoint. As I said, Breach are facing off against an elite search destroy team. Typically when they do, they don't win the S&Ds. So I like Rocket more there. And I guess because Boston are not winning controls often enough, you like Minnesota more in the controls as well. So I don't know. I feel like Minnesota also can maybe even trade a Hardpoint depending on what it is versus Breach. So I'm going to go with Minnesota. I think that this series does go down to a game 5, but I'm going to give the edge to Rocker. Again, it makes me angry because I want to give Boston the dub, but they're just not good enough in control. And Minnesota aren't great at control either. So that very well is probably going to be the swing mode. Boston's going to win the opening Hardpoint. Minnesota's going to win the search and destroy. Who's going to go up 2-1? I like the Rocker more in that case, depending on what the map will be, but still, I like Rocker's chances to close it out in game 5. We'll see what Boston can do. But as I said, search, destroy, Hardpoint, control, they have to get that stuff in line. And we'll see if they have the ability to do it. But I will give Rocker the W and what I believe will be one of the best series of the entire day. I think this could be a 3-0. I think this could be a 3-0 or 3-1. And I've got this one going to a game 5. And I think it absolutely will go that way. So let's move on. To me, one of the most interesting, one of the best series that we have got in all of week number 2, a spicy one for London and for FaZe. As I said, I'm going to be so geared up and ready for this matchup because it is going to be the test. And I don't care what anybody says. This is a test for who is number 2 in the CDL. This is going to show us who is the number 2 team. London literally just went 2-0. Granted, one of the victories is versus New York, but the other one is versus the Thieves on double Kavutu. The Ravens have showed us that they are the 3rd place team right now in the standings. No question about it. And if they beat Atlanta, that moves them up into number 2. At least in my book, it absolutely does in the short term. I'm not saying that it's not possible for FaZe to reclaim that title. I'm just saying in the short term, London moves up. I think that the gap has started to close a little bit, and I would give London the edge in that case. This is going to be a very test-heavy week for the London Royal Ravens. There was something to be somewhat concerned about if you are an Atlanta fan. Off of a loss versus Seattle, facing off against London, then you've got Toronto, and then something to think about for FaZe, right? Then they have Florida, which can be a tricky team sometimes. Still expect them to take that W. And then, my friends, we have got the game, right? The rematch of the Major 1 final, OpTic Texas versus Atlanta FaZe. So, as I said, these W's are going to mean a lot for Atlanta. They want to try to walk away with these as much as they possibly can. Both these teams did meet up against each other at the Major 1 qualifiers, in the Major 1 tournament, where FaZe was able to take it 3-1. The only loss that FaZe did suffer versus London was in that Desert Siege, where FaZe was up like 5-1, and London managed to clutch up, which was very impressive, I must say. London are off of a win versus Paris in my book, which is nice. I think it's a 3-0 or 3-1. And then Gizmo's obviously going to be back in the lineup, which is going to be great to see how he performs. I want to say that he did not play well at all versus FaZe in this series. He did not have a great Major 1 tournament, which again, I don't know what's going on personal wise. That absolutely could have affected his game plan, his gameplay. Gosh, I want to talk about London so bad. I'm going to keep talking about London. I was going to advance to FaZe. One thing that I really like about London, right, is that they continue to show us the layers. They continue to show us that they are a very well-rounded team, almost like the Toronto Ultra from last year, right? And obviously it's a different story. Toronto started off not looking great. They pick up insight, everything changes. But for London, to start off, right, the Major 1 qualifiers, it was all about Gizmo. It was all about Afro, right? Those are the guys that got the spotlight. We saw Nasty performing. Zero would have his maps on occasion, but it was all about the young guns. It was all about this young roster. Just looks like they could take off way better than we thought that they would be after they got 3-0'd by Seattle at the kickoff. Total turnaround, go 4-1. Come in with a top seed at the Major 1 tournament. Then, right, we go to the Major 1 tournament and then finish top 3. Keeping in mind that Gizmo, Afro, and Nasty don't have over a 1 KD. The one guy who has over a 1 KD is the leader, the guy that everybody said was questioned and zero. And he performs and has one of the better series, one of the better tournaments that we've seen from him in a very long time, right? They beat Gorillas, they beat Toronto. They go to a game 4 versus OpTic where, you know, it wasn't pretty after the first map. It was not a pretty sight. Then they faced off against Atlanta. Have a few close maps, right? The game 2 and the game 3 was close. And now, right, with a substitute, they go 2-0, right? That just goes to show the core of this team is constantly being tested, and a majority of the time, they're answering it, right? They faced off against OpTic and Atlanta, the two teams that won or that went to the finals of the event. You can't really take a whole lot from there. But how does London come through? Now with Gizmo being back in the lineup, they will have him, I'm assuming, right, versus Paris. This is going to be a chance for them to really gear up, prepare for FaZe the next day. And if you're Atlanta, as I said, coming off of a loss versus the Surge in a shocking Game 5, it felt like they were just not there. It really did. It felt like FaZe was their confidence was shaken. In the Berlin Hardpoint and the Berlin Search Destroy, they just did not look like they were in their element at all. And I want to say this is like the first time for Atlanta where they've had a back-to-back loss. I think it happened once in Cold War, I want to say. But we've never really seen Atlanta FaZe lose back-to-back games, especially early on. So this is a statement game, right? This is a statement game. FaZe, in my eyes, are going to be focused, and they better come out and look solid out of the gates, because if they get brought down early, I think that their confidence, again, could be shaken, right? You are the defending world champions. Every time it feels like you have a series to dominate, teams are coming at you, right? They know the talent that you have. Seattle beat them at the Kickoff Classic and their ring ceremony game. FaZe have a 5-0 week at the Major 1 qualifiers. They come into Major 1. They face off against OpTic, get reverse swept. They then fire through everybody in the losers bracket to the elimination bracket. They stormed everybody. They reverse sweep LA Thieves, which kind of a little scary. Then they beat Toronto. Then they beat London, or in reverse order, whatever it was. And then they come into the series versus OpTic, lose 5-2, only win Search and Destroys. This is a huge game for the Atlanta FaZe. And I think this is going to shock some people. I think this is going to be a 3-0. And I think that it's going to be a 3-0 for the Atlanta FaZe. Now, I totally understand each and every person who thinks this is going to go to a game 5, who thinks this is going to be a close 3-1 in favor of FaZe or in favor of the London Royal Ravens. I am betting a lot on the fact that FaZe are going to come out and just say, you know what? Let's just run through this team, right? Let's just run through the Ravens. They've got to be frustrated, right? The Seattle Surge team just always continues to pick away at them. They're just like that annoying team that's just the back of your mind that for whatever reason just has your number and you probably don't even know why. I want to see FaZe just say, you know what? Screw that. I don't even care about that, right? I don't even care that we just lost versus Seattle. Let's just come out and show that we are one of the best teams in the game. I'm sure that they still obviously believe that they are the best team in the game, as they should. Every roster should think they're the best team in the game. I want to see FaZe come out and just dominate from a FaZe fan's perspective. Now, personally, right, in terms of like being a commentator, I would love for this to go to a game 5. I really would. I'm just being totally honest with you. I'd love to see for this to go to a game 5. But I think that FaZe come out, win this 3-0 or 3-1. I really do. I think that Atlanta come out, they're hungry. They know that there is a very good chance, right? If they're not on their A game, they can lose versus London. They can lose versus Toronto potentially, right? Two teams that they dominated at the Major 1 tournament in the elimination bracket. These teams now have VOD. These teams have preparation. This is an Ultra team that has taken FaZe the distance last year. Big week. A huge week for FaZe, but I think they respond accordingly. All right. I know we talked about that series for a long time, but it deserves it. Let's move on. Paris versus New York. This is going to decide, right? This is going to decide who is number 11 versus number 12 in the standings, obviously based off of points, as long as Paris do lose to London on day 1, which I think 99% of people are going to predict that to be the case. So if that is in fact the case, this is going to decide who is number 11th and who is number 12th in standings. You could say, okay, cool, it's going to be a sleeper game. I don't think so, right? I don't think this is going to be a sleeper game at all. I think that this is going to be a huge test, obviously for Paris, because right? They've used Jimbo in 3 series. In my opinion, they're going to be 0-3 coming into a big match versus the Subliners, who we don't know who they're going to have. At the time of recording this, we do not know who the Subliners are going to have in their lineup, at least for the moment, right? New York are off of losses versus London 3-1. They get 3-0 smacked by Florida in what was honestly like a gut-wrenching series. Like you never want to see a team where you know it's over, know that it's over. Like you don't want to see a roster come into a matchup where you're like, gosh, man, if they don't perform, like, you know that the vibes are down. You know that this team is just mentally, they're out of it. And they were out of it. They were out of it versus Florida. As soon as I saw the vetoes, I knew it was going to be over. Playing Bocage hardpoint versus Florida just does not make any sense to me whatsoever. You had Crim6 decide to run an SMG. Apparently that was Neptune's idea. I don't personally get that at all, because you're facing off against a Florida team, very fast paced, loves to be in your face. Yeah, let's go ahead and change up the roles a little bit. Let's go ahead and give Crim6 the SMG, a guy who doesn't normally run the SMG full time, not a cracked out sub. And you have a player like Neptune, who is supposed to be a cracked out sub. To me, that was the perfect opportunity for New York to say, you know what, Neptune, fly at him. Play the way that you want to. We have nothing to lose. We very well could not be with each other the next time that the Subliners play a series. So that is something to think about. As of the recording, Paul X is rumored to be joining the New York Subliners, and in that same report, I think it was that Intel Call of Duty had posted about, a second is expected to be joining the Subliners as well. I'll be honest with you, I have no idea. I really don't. I have no clue. I have no intel on anything. It just sounds like Paul's going to be coming into the team, and to me, that goes to show that Crim or Clay are out of here, right? That's just what it is. So if we're thinking about predictions, if we're thinking about what this means versus Paris, either Crim and Clay are not going to be in this series if Paul is joining the Subliners, which is still yet to be seen as of the recording of this video. So you're either not going to have Crim or you're not going to have Clay. At least I highly doubt, right, that they would put Crim6 on a full-time SMG and put Paul in the flex. I mean, it's possible. I just don't see that being likely. But maybe it is. But to me, whenever I saw that report, I was like, okay, Crim or Clay are probably out of here. One of them's either going to be benched, somebody's going to get sent to another team, something's going to happen. So it is very difficult to dive into this series because, as we said, we have no idea what we're going to see out of the Subliners. This is a proving game for Jimbo, a proving game for Paris, who I expect to lose handily versus the Ravens, or at least in a 3-1 fashion. So I don't know. I really don't. There could be 2 new players on this New York team. We don't know if Clay's going to be there. We don't know if Crim's going to be there. The only guarantee of a player who's going to be in this series is Hydra, who is going to be a very influential player and possibly shutting down somebody like Jimbo. So again, it's hard to predict. And honestly, I'm just going to go strictly based off the fact that I think that whoever is on this New York team is going to want to try to prove themselves, whether it's Paul, whether it's Brezzy, whether it's Johnny, whether it's Havoc, whether it's whoever it is, right? If they decide to bring in 2 players, Paul's going to be motivated. Obviously, Hydra's going to be motivated. Either Crim or Clay is going to be motivated, or both of them are going to be motivated. Like I said, this is going to be a huge game for New York to say that, no, we are not the worst team in the game. And it's kind of annoying because if you are New York, like, at least for me, you obviously prefer to face off against an easier roster first. But it does take the pressure off if you were to face off against like a London, right? It would take the pressure off you're facing off against like a FAZE or an LA Thieves. Like, there is zero pressure on you to win that series because, hey, it's a new team. You're expected to beat a Paris team even with these new additions. So that's just the way that I look at it. I'm going to say that New York wins it in a 3-1, maybe a 3-2. I'll say 3-2 for now. Again, like I said, I just have no idea who's going to be on this team. I literally could be talking right now and you're like, Landon, look at Twitter. Look at Twitter. I'm bumping my microphone. Look at Twitter. I don't see it. It's not happening for me. I'm going to refresh my Twitter right now, and I'm going to see if anybody has been added to New York yet. No, nothing yet. So we're going to do what we can do, and we'll move on. OpTic versus Florida. I have OpTic Texas off of a victory versus Seattle. This should still, like I said, OpTic still considered to be the best team in the game. There's no question after that. If they lose to the Surge, that is terrifying. Just considering the fact that maybe Seattle is now back on top. I mean, victories versus FaZe and OpTic, you got to move them up the standings. I don't think that happens though. Now, one thing that I would like to see, kind of on topic of Matt vetoes already, I would love for OpTic to come out and play Bocage versus the Mutineers, a team that has won like their last 4 or 5. I want to say, I can confirm that. They've won it. Florida has played it their last 4 opening hard points. They've won their last 4. They beat Seattle, they beat Boston, they beat the Gorillas, and they beat New York. So I don't know. I would like to see OpTic play Bocage versus this team, just to square up, to be like, yeah, we're going to try to play a map that we typically do like to play versus a team that arguably is one of the best on it in the entirety of the game. So that could be pretty fun. I don't know. Maybe that'll happen. Obviously, when we talk about Florida, which is really the primary discussion, we know for the most part what we're going to see out of OpTic. What are we going to see out of Florida? Which just continues to be the question that we ask ourselves every single week. What Mutineers team are we going to have in week number 2 of Major number 2? I got to say, great week that they're off of. I mean, they go 2-0, 6-0 in maps, back-to-back 3-0 wins versus LAG and the Subliners. Granted, I don't take anything at all into consideration after a victory versus New York. They literally gave you your best map. The team was not there. It is what it is. So I take the 3-0 win versus Gorillas. I do not take into consideration the victory versus New York. But one thing to also think about is that Florida, in their back-to-back 3-0 wins, got the very same maps and won the very same maps, which are Bocage Hardpoint, Tuscan S&D, and Tuscan Control. I would not be shocked if we see those same 3 maps again. I really wouldn't. Because OpTic likes all 3 of those maps. OpTic like to square up on Bocage. They like to play Tuscan S&D, and they love Tuscan Control. I don't know. I think it'd be fun to see OpTic try and pull that one out. I really would. I think it would be a great opportunity for OpTic to really be tested versus a Mutineers team. I should say this. It would be the most vulnerable that OpTic would be versus this Mutineers team, which maybe you feel comfortable at that point, right? I think that you would feel comfortable potentially facing off against the Mutineers team where you know that Florida's going to be at their best. And maybe if you are trying to work on your Bocage Hardpoint, for example, this is a great team to do it against. So with that being the case, much similar to Seattle, right? I think that OpTic, I'm almost at Toronto versus Boston. I think that OpTic decide to play those 3 maps, and I think that they win at 3-0. I do. I had in my predictions as 3-1, but I really do think that OpTic can win on all 3 of those, despite those being great maps for Florida. If they decide to play those vetoes, which it could be totally opposite. Like I said, it could be a totally different set. Who knows? But I think that OpTic come out and they 3-0 the Mutineers. Like I said, this very well could be a 3-0. This, to me, looks to be the perfect signs. If OpTic wants to, right? If they don't want to test vetoes, I think they will test vetoes this week. But if they don't, this absolutely has the case to be a flawless 6-0 week for OpTic Texas. A great way to kick off their major one is to start off 3-0, especially with that Atlanta FaZe game looming in week number 3. So yeah, like I said, it's not necessarily anything on the Mutineers, right? We know that Mutineers can be an on and off team. I think they get a nice win versus Gorillas. But again, it's just a matter of them sometimes dominating, sometimes getting dominated. I think you're facing off against the best team in the game. I just don't think it happens. We'll go and move on. Toronto versus Boston. This is a rematch from Major 1. Actually, I had the cast on this, and this was one of my favorite series of that entire weekend, right? It was Zinni versus the Ultra. It's Methods versus his old team. And they get the chance to face off again. In that series, it goes to a game 5. Toronto win 2-3-5. Boston win both of the hard points, and Methods, I'm pretty sure, went off in both of those hard points. I think he was leading in slang for that series. It was an excellent performance out of him. Obviously, he was very motivated to try to beat that roster, and it came down to a crazy, I'm trying to think. Let me actually go back really quick. I don't know if it went to round 11. I think it was around 10. Yeah, it was around 10. Tuscan S&D, and it was almost like a story. Methods calls in the glide bomb just a hair too late, where Insight, the player who replaced him, is on the defuse. The streak is maybe a second late in taking him down, and had he called it in just a little bit earlier, which it wasn't his fault, but had he called it in just a hair earlier, they could have walked away with the game, or rather sent it to around 11, and who knows what happens at that point. But speaking specifically on Toronto, this will be one of the 2 games that Toronto have this week, and this is a big week for the Ultra. Not only do you have Boston, but you have FaZe the next day. Obviously, they are off of a 3-1 win versus Minnesota, in which they won all 3 respawns. Let's go Toronto, right? They finally do break the 7-game hardpoint losing streak. They get that out of there. They get that out of their minds versus a rocker roster. So I don't know. I think if you're Toronto, you know, you're happy to get that out of the way. I think this is a team that's still trying to prove themselves, who is also still trying to catch FaZe, trying to catch London, trying to catch OpTic. So I think this will be a really fun series as well. I've got Boston losing in a game 5 to the Minnesota Rocker. I have them winning hard points, but losing Search Destroy, losing the control as well, in my opinion. So S&D is really going to be tested this week for Boston, right? You've got some of the better teams. You get the best S&D team in the game based off of records, and you've got one of the other best Search Destroy teams in the game, and the Toronto Ultra. So to me, the records that Boston have in Search Destroy will indicate how well they did this week, right? If you were to say, okay, Boston went 2-0, it's because their S&D was elite. If Boston goes 0-2, it's because the Search Destroy was not as in point as it needs to be. And I think that's going to be very much a similar story. It's a very difficult week for Boston, right? This Minnesota team is just so annoying to face off against. Then you have the Ultra, who are equally as annoying and potentially, in my opinion, obviously better than Minnesota. So if I have Boston losing to Rocker, I'm going to have Boston as well losing to Toronto. That just makes this game that much more important, with this one just one day ahead of it. I think that Toronto do look better than what they did at Major 1. As we said, Toronto literally were 0-7 in hardpoint, but yet still finished top 4. That means they're winning Search Destroys, and that means they're obviously winning their controls. I think that Toronto is now better at hardpoint, so I think they have the ability to trade those. I think I like them more on the Search Destroys than I do Boston on a majority of the maps. And I like Ultra, obviously, more in the controls than I do Boston. So with that, I will give Boston one of these games. I'm not going to say this is going to go to a game 5. I think that Boston's looking better, but I think Toronto is looking even better than the progress that the Breach have been making. So Toronto's going to be testing the hard points. This is going to be a great opportunity for them to at least walk away with one. I think that they will be successful in doing that. So an unfortunate week for Breach, right? They go 0-2 off of a nice win versus Seattle. So now they're 1-2. Toronto get a huge win. Minnesota get a huge win. Maybe New York gets a W. FaZe gets a nice little W versus Ravens. And now we're coming in to Sunday. CDL Sunday, not Championship Sunday, but it is CDL Sunday. LAG versus the Seattle Surge. The Gorillas, this is their first match and only match of the week, as they had a 1-1 performance in week number 1. They get 3-0'd by Florida, and they come back and they 3-0 versus Paris. Another team that's, to me, becoming one of the most difficult rosters to predict in the entirety of the CDL. They seem to be a very, very wild card type of roster. I'm still not overly impressed with their Search Destroy. Control victories seem to happen here and there. And I think that LAG team, right, that came out and just obviously walked away with the dub versus Paris, we're just a hungry team, right? I think that after the 3-0 loss that they suffer versus Florida, I think that there was a lot of questions already out there. People were saying, okay, well, Slasher didn't have a great game again. You know, can this team actually compete? Like, are they starting to fall in the bottom, 3 or 4 rosters in the game? I think they wanted to show out and prove that that's not the case. This will be a great testing game for LAG and for Seattle. I've got Seattle off of a loss versus OpTic Texas. And this matchup, to me, I don't know. Like, I really could see any game going either which way. I think you like Gorillas more on the hard points the majority of the time. I think you like Seattle more on the S&Ds, more on the control, possibly. Again, anything could happen. For some reason, LAG just happen to be winning S&Ds and control more often than not, but they are not consistent enough to really make you feel like you can really invest in that. I think that we will have a Berlin hardpoint in this series at some point, because this is a map that obviously Seattle are off of a victory in taking versus FaZe. LAG really likes this map a lot. They played a ton, so that's a guarantee to have in this set. So that'll be a really good test for both these rosters and the hard points. I don't know. Like, I really don't. I feel like this really has the ability to go either way. It's difficult because, like, is Surge really going to beat FaZe, lose to OpTic 3-1 or 3-0, then come into this matchup versus Gorillas and lose? Like, is that actually going to happen? Or is LAG going to come out and just roll versus Surge and just be very unpredictable? I literally have no idea how to go for this game. To me, this is one of the, if not the most difficult match to predict of the week, outside of this one, which is just not guaranteed yet. This one, to me, I literally have no idea. Maybe I'll go to the comments and just see what people predict most to walk away with this game. I had LAG down originally, and I'll stick with that. I'll say 3-1 for the Gorillas. But again, I really don't know. I feel like Seattle very well could walk away with this game and maybe take it. So I'm literally switching in my head over and over again on who I think is actually going to walk away with the series. This is annoying. Do I come back to this one? I'll say Gorillas take it. I'm going to move on. This is one that very well is probably going to change 4 or 5 more times before I actually officially lock it in for the matchup. So that is the one to consider. That very well could be the one that that changes, or maybe that really is going to be different on a lot of people's prediction boards. Let's move on. LA Thieves versus Minnesota Rocker. Thieves, right? 0-2 week, a 3-0 loss to London with a sub. They lose double Gavutu. Draza does not have a great performance. Then they go into the series versus OpTic Texas with their heads down. They go to a game 5. They dominate on Desert Siege. They look great on Berlin Hardpoint game 4. They're up 5-4 in the Tuscan Search Destroy and can't close it out. They allow for multiple clutches for OpTic to take in that Tuscan S&D. A few 1v2s, up a few times in early rounds and still losing them. I don't know. For Thieves, you take a game 5 victory versus OpTic and you're like, okay, cool. Like we really tested them. But as I said, it's on maps that OpTic is just trying out. Like they're just trying to expand their map pool. So getting outslayed by, 71 kills versus OpTic, that's not it. Like that can't happen. That cannot continue to happen. So I feel like for both teams, this is going to be a great matchup, because if you are the LA Thieves, the positive is, hey, you know what? Minnesota, not a great hardpoint team. So let's get our hardpoints in order. If we get a Gavutu control, perfect. Minnesota's not good at control. On the flip side for Minnesota, who I have getting a W versus Boston, a huge game for Rocker, right? If they can beat the LA Thieves, that's massive for them. But if you're Rocker, you're like, cool, right? This is a team that's great at hardpoint. Who cares? We don't even like hardpoints. We're great at Search Destroy. Thieves, outside of winning a random 6-0 Desert Siege versus OpTic, do not seem to be on point in Search Destroy. Let's play them on Berlin. Let's just thrash them. And then you're like, okay, cool. All we have to do is just win one respawn, right? We're guaranteed to win the S&Ds. If we can get to a game 5, we are sitting pretty. It's the same story that it's been all season long. Rocker, win one respawn. You get a Tuscan control. Beautiful. But still, I don't know. To me, this is going to come down heavily to the coin flip, because you fully expect Thieves to win the hard points. You expect Rocker to take the Search Destroys. Who's going to get the control that they want, right? Is Minnesota going to get the Tuscan? Is Thieves going to get the Gavutu? The thing to think about, though, is that Minnesota in general just are not that great at control, whether it's Tuscan or whether it's something else, right? They get 3-1 by Toronto on Tuscan. They 3-1 Paris on Tuscan. And the last time that these teams matched up, Thieves got double Gavutu because Minnesota like playing the bigger maps. Minnesota do like playing Berlin. Minnesota do like playing Gavutu. As we said, they've yet to win on a Bocage or a Tuscan hardpoint, and Thieves are like, cool, if you want to play us on Tuscan, we'll do that. If you want to play us on Berlin, we will do that. If you want to play us on Gavutu, granted, little sore spot right now after they lost versus Ravens, but they will still do that. I think this is a hard matchup for Rocker because I do not see them winning a hardpoint at all. And then the Search Destroy, obviously you expect them to look good on it, but maybe if it's a Tuscan, Thieves, right? I mean, they look a little better at Search Destroy. To me, there's not like a whole lot of positives for Minnesota that say, yeah, they can win a respawn, or yeah, they can win a control. To me, the Tuscan is not good enough. And if it's a Gavutu, I think it's a guaranteed 3-1. I think it's a guaranteed 3-1 in this series. I think it happens again. And it very well could even be a 3-0. Like, to me, a lot of this is going to be based off of the vetoes, based off the coin flip. You know, obviously, if it is a Gavutu, Minnesota, a must win is a Search Destroy. If it's a Tuscan control, Minnesota could have a chance. And if Minnesota happen to take advantage of a Thieves team who maybe is not at their strongest in hardpoint, maybe there's a chance there. So there's a lot of little situations where you're looking at in this series to see who is really tightening up on things versus who is not. But I do think the Thieves take this series. I don't know. I mean, there's a little bit of me that maybe thinks that Rocker could walk away with this, but just based off of, again, the hardpoint maps that Minnesota are good at, that's the problem. Thieves like those maps. So, like, I'd love to be like, yeah, Minnesota, they can take one of the hardpoints. If they can go 1-for-1 in hardpoint, everything changes. I do not see that happening. And for that reason, it's a no for me. I'm going to go with Thieves, walking away with this in a 3-1. Basically the exact same thing that happened at the opening major, but we'll see. I hope that Rocker put up a good performance, because as I said, this is a big week for them. You can see the predictions here. Like we said, they have the loss versus Toronto, the win versus Paris, so they're 1-1. They can have another 1-1 week, right, where they beat Boston. If they, like I said, if they beat Boston, they're 2-1. If they beat Thieves, they're 3-1, guaranteed. They are good to make it into the winner side. And then what? Who do they have after that? They've got the New York Subliners, which is still a question mark. So, like I said, they get this. If they get both dubs this week, they're solid. They get one, still sitting in a pretty good spot. But if they lose versus Boston, then they have a good chance of losing versus Thieves. They go 0-2 down. No way that they can make it into the winners bracket. So, again, a huge week for Minnesota, a huge week for FaZe. A lot of big games going down. And on topic with that, we will talk about FaZe in their final game versus Toronto. It's going to be a very fun match. I think it's going to be a really fun match. This is a rematch from Major 1, FaZe 1-3-0, and quite convincingly in that elimination bracket. I think it was a quarterfinal, semifinal, something like that. Toronto, I had them off of a victory versus Boston. This is another big game for the Toronto side as well. As we said, this is another big game for Toronto, an opportunity for them to start off 3-0. If they do get that W versus Boston, because they're 1-0 coming into that game, I think they'll be 2-0 coming into this matchup. And then next week for Toronto, they've got Paris and they've got New York. Again, a great opportunity for Toronto to really pick things up after what was a little bit of a shaky Major 1 and not winning hardpoints. So I don't think there's a ton of pressure on Ultra to walk away with this series, but I feel as if they've got a good chance to possibly test FaZe. And as I said, right, for the Atlanta side, if they don't win this matchup versus London, this gets a lot more scary, because we know that FaZe are beatable. They'd be off of a 3-game losing spree, and now they're facing off against the Toronto team, who knows them better than anybody else. There is no team that exists in the CDL who knows FaZe better than the Toronto Ultra. The amount of matchups they had last season, the amount of finals that they faced off against each other in last season, all 8 players are the same. And constantly, Simp would discuss and talk about, right, in his videos that he would make, players from FaZe. The reason why Toronto are such a competitive team with us, right, they did this last year, is because they know our weaknesses. They know how to penalize us. They can compete with us in search destroy. They can compete with us in the controls. And at times they can beat you in a hard point if you're not careful. So as I said, this is not a game where if you're FaZe, despite beating this team at Major 1, where you're like, okay, cool, we have Toronto, like we're good. Like, we feel good about that match. I think that this could be another scary sign for FaZe. We're like, okay, we have London. Now we have Toronto. And then we have OpTic Texas next week. Like I said, folks, this is a huge week for FaZe. A good chance if they lose versus London, this could be another victory for the upsetting team. This could be another underdog type of victory for the Toronto end. To me, the vetoes are going to be interesting in this series. If you're Toronto, I feel like you'd probably, which I don't actually know their Gavutu records. I don't want to say it's like a excellent map for them. Excuse me. If they won a Gavutu versus Minnesota, they lose to Tuscan last time they played. It looks like they're winning Gavutus and Tuscans pretty evenly. Doesn't look like it's maybe one more preferred than the other. They'd probably rather play Tuscan. But it wouldn't surprise me if they want to play Gavutu in this series. So the coin flip will be big. Again, the questions are going to come around Toronto, whether or not the hard points can be there, whether or not they can be competitive in that mode. FaZe obviously have the ability to win search destroys. Can Toronto take hard points versus Atlanta? That will be a big question in that veto process as well. Especially if they play Bocage, which Toronto likes Bocage. FaZe loves Bocage as well. So there's that to think about. But again, if you're Toronto, if you can get underneath the skin of FaZe, whether if they're off of a loss versus London, and even if they're not, catch them sleeping, catch them, not winning a Berlin hardpoint, or for example, things like that. This could be the window of opportunity that Ultra are looking for. But I am gonna go with Atlanta to take this. I think that Atlanta answer accordingly. I know there's a lot of people out there who just assume that all the casters are such big fans of FaZe. We're not like the biggest fans of FaZe. You just respect the way that they play COD. You respect the dominance that they have displayed in MW, and specifically last year. So I think that FaZe will answer back. Again, a chance for Atlanta to go 0-2 this week, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think that they answer versus London in a commanding way. I think they come into this matchup versus Toronto and they win it in a 3-1. I think that they win the opening hardpoint. The search destroy could be up in the air. I think that Atlanta win the control and they win the following hardpoint. It could go to a game 5. It very well has the chance to get there. But I am going to say that this is a 3-1 for the Atlanta FaZe. Atlanta, despite the loss versus Surge, they answer back. They have a 2-0 week. OpTic has a 2-0 week. Who else? Boston, they go 0-2, so that's a big kicker for them. Minnesota go 1-1, which if you're a Rocker fan, you will take, considering that you have 2 very difficult matchups. Paris go 0-2. Subletters get their first dub. LAG maybe get a W versus Seattle. Seattle, maybe they go 0-2. Maybe they go 1-1 if they can beat the Gorillas. A lot of storylines, but as we said, this big one for New York, it's going to be huge. OpTic, if they can go flawless this week, would be amazing for them, and I think there's a real chance for them to do that. But it is a scary week. If you are an Atlanta FaZe fan, you want to see them come out strong versus Ravens, and if not, they could be in some scary territory. So that is going to be it, right, for week number 2 of our Major 2 qualifiers, folks. It is going to be a wonderful 3 days of Call of Duty. It's going to be fun. I really appreciate the support that we've been getting on these LandO's lock-ins episodes. You guys have been absolutely phenomenal, showing all kinds of support. I really appreciate that. If you've not done so already, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Again, we've got all kinds of content still planned and in the pipeline right now. These lock-ins videos come out every single week. So if you're new, you managed to get through the whole thing, and you're like, what the heck? How did I just get through this whole episode? You can feel free to check in next week, because we're going to be doing it all over again for week 3, which should be crazy, and in preparation for the Minnesota Major. I'm going to lock in my predictions, and there you have it. Lock them in. I hope that you're locking them in as well, because you better be doing it. It's called LandO's lock-ins for a reason. We got to make sure that we lock in the predictions. It's only right. I appreciate the support, guys. Thank you so much for liking the video. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. Hope you guys have a great week and enjoy the matches. It's going to be a fun set of 10. And who knows? Maybe we could have a solid week this week. Maybe it's our chance to perform. We'll see if it happens. Best of luck to your pick'ems, and I will see you guys on the broadcast and next week for another episode. Take care.